Good morning from the National Weather Service in Raleigh. It's the 4th of September, Wednesday, at 11:30 with your Hurricane Dorian update as it relates to impacts for central North Carolina. On the screen, I'm showing basically live data here, radar and satellite imagery, and you can see the upper level clouds that are streaming northward across central North Carolina. Sure enough, those are connected to Dorian, so we're starting to see some of the Dorian clouds, at least the high clouds anyway. And you can see as I remove the satellite imagery, you can see the very outer, kind of pre-running outer rain bands are that are loosely connected to Dorian or approaching the Carolina coast. So yeah, it's things are progressing. So I'm going to minimize this here for a little bit. Hopefully, it won't pop up and interfere with our other slides. But again, this is your 11:30 briefing, and let's go ahead and jump into some of these briefing slides. The changes here are watch warning advisory related. We've upgraded the tropical storm watch to a tropical storm warning, and we've added 2 additional counties. We added Wake and we added Franklin County to the earlier watch that was in effect. The flash flood watch is undergoing an expansion as we speak. So I wasn't able to get it into these slides, but we will be expanding the flash flood watch to basically match the same counties as the tropical storm warning. So Wake, Franklin, and Halifax County will be added to this here momentarily. So hopefully, before I email these slides out to everyone, I'll hopefully be able to update this graphic here and get that included. So those are the changes. All right, so really, again, everything's pretty much on track. I would suggest that folks get their preparations completed by really this evening, because things are going to go downhill during the daytime tomorrow. Here's the situation overview in terms of what types of impacts we're expecting: wind, flooding, rain, and a lesser extent tornado, and certainly the main concerns being wind gusts of tropical storm strength, 40 to 60 miles per hour, with a lot of downed trees and power outages, mainly east of US 1. Strongest winds, we're still talking tomorrow evening through tomorrow night into Friday morning. Rainfall, obviously flash flooding will be a concern really anytime late tomorrow through midday Friday. Again, the highest rainfall amounts along and east of I-95, where 4 to 8 inches of rain may fall. And really the tornado risk is mainly confined east of I-95 Thursday through early Friday morning. So that's the concerns there. Again, this just is another way of showing how wind and rain are our main concerns with Dorian's impacts and hazards tomorrow and Friday. All right, so here's the probabilistic. Again, really a pretty decent shot for tropical storm force winds across basically the eastern third of the state. Or pretty much a guarantee there along the immediate coastal area, while hurricane force winds are certain to remain east of central North Carolina. Notice I underline the word central North Carolina, and the point there is hurricane force winds are mainly expected right along the coast and maybe coastal North Carolina. All right, so timing, the most likely time for arrival of tropical storm force winds, the southern and eastern portions of North Carolina could see them as early as Thursday afternoon. So again, you want to have preparations done by this evening. All right. So this is sort of while no numbers are on the map per se, this is just meant to give you an idea of where the risk for the highest winds are located. So tropical storm force, 39 starts at 39 miles per hour, maybe up to 57 miles an hour where you see the yellow. And then higher winds than that, where you see the orange, and higher winds even more than that along the immediate coast. So you could see clearly this would tell you that the greatest risk for power outages would be mainly south and east of Raleigh, where wind gusts in the whole general area could be 40 to 60 miles per hour, and again blowing over trees, causing power outages. Highest winds again Thursday afternoon through Friday morning. In terms of the maximum wind gust that we think are likely to occur, again, that swath of 40 to 60. And let me see if I can do a little drawing here to make this a little clearer. But basically, we've got a swath of 40 to 60 miles per hour in the general, just south and east of Raleigh. So that's the general area we're referring to, and again, corresponding with the previous slide that I showed. That's where we think, at least in central North Carolina, the portion of central North Carolina that we think will have the greatest risk for wind damage. There could be some gusts 25, 30 miles per hour in the triad, so I wouldn't necessarily get too worried about widespread power outages or downed trees in the triad. For our friends in the triad, there probably will be some isolated power outages, but mainly as a result of dead trees or trees that were already weakened falling over. So that's the obviously the worst of the wind is right along the coast. You can see hurricane force wind gusts along the first tier of counties along the coast and along the Outer Banks. So that's where the most devastating wind damage is expected. All right, so switching slides here. In terms of where we think the risk for tornadoes, mainly across the far east and southeast portions of central North Carolina and points east of that for tornado risk. All right, in terms of rainfall, shifting gears to rainfall. So this really, we tweaked this up maybe just a little bit from yesterday, subtle tweaks, but generally looking at terms of where we think the worst of the rain and flood potential, mainly from essentially, just east and south of Raleigh over toward, the coastal plain. There could be a 4 to 8 inch swath of rain there, 4 to 8 inch, 4 lesser amounts west, greater amounts east. And then obviously east of the coastal plain, that's where you get into your, higher amounts, upwards of 10 inches, where flash flood risk will be even greater. Once you get west of US 1, essentially west of the US 1 corridor, kind of like where I'm drawing this line here roughly, that's where the risk for flash flooding diminishes pretty quickly. That's why we issued our flash flood watch for the counties that I highlighted earlier. As I mentioned, Wake and Franklin and Halifax will be added to that watch here shortly. But once you get west of that line, generally west of US 1, the risk for any flash flooding should drop off pretty quickly. And if we have any friends listening in the sort of the far northwest part of the state, you might stay dry the whole time. So anyway, that's the way things are shaping up there. All right, and this is another way of basically conveying what I just mentioned. Flooding risk is mainly along and east of US 1, as I mentioned, with greater risks the further you go east. Timing for this, again, tomorrow through midday Friday. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Barrett, our hydrologist, to give a quick rundown on the rivers.
All right. Hey, thanks, Nick. Wanted to just run down real quickly our rivers again. And Nick mentioned the basin average rainfall. We're looking at 2 to 5 inches with some higher amounts up to 8 inches, mainly east of I-95. And so the distribution of the rainfall is actually falling in a way that's helping us out to minimize our flooding threat. We really need more rain to the west to fill up the river. So this is a look at the Cape Fear Basin. These hydrographs flow from west to east. So the Hall River over in Alamance in the top left, and Cape Fear River down in Fayetteville in bottom right. And what you're going to notice with the Cape Fear and the other basins is the best response down in the bottom right at Fayetteville, but again, a minimal bump when you're talking about the potential for flooding there. Looking at the Neuse Basin, I think the Neuse Basin could be a basin where if we were to get higher rainfall amounts, and some of our models have indicated that if we were to get 6 plus inches of basin average rainfall is what we would need to get flooding. This might be an area where we could get some minor flooding is most likely what we would get. And so Clayton, Smithfield, and Goldsboro all showing some decent responses, but again, well below flood stage. The Tar Basin is another one where we'll likely see some response just due to the duration of some of the rain bands and higher rainfall amounts. And the Tar River, Tarboro, and Rocky Mount are areas that we could likely see some higher rises, again, below flood stage. And finally, the Roanoke Basin, I'm just showing here that we've got some control on that river, and we're likely to stay below flood stage. So, do want to point out that just because we're not looking at flooding on our main stem rivers, some of our smaller tributaries in the eastern parts of the Piedmont, may see some higher levels and may get out of their banks. And so that flash flooding threat does exist despite the lack of river flooding in a tropical system. So thanks, Nick. Pass it back to you.
All right. Thanks so much, Barrett. Appreciate it. All right. We're getting close enough to the storm where I felt comfortable putting in some of these radar simulations. And if you've been watching our webinars for the past couple of years, you see we kind of have we kind of like to include these in our briefings just because it gives you a fairly decent sense of timing. Early, we try to be more general. As we get a little closer, maybe we'll put some timestamps on these. But I just want to give folks a general sense of when things may get underway. Obviously, don't take this as like this is exactly how it's going to play out. This is a really rough idea, a really rough simulation. It's not going to be exactly like this. And don't take this as intensity either. So it's just meant to give you a sense of timing. And actually, this may help answer one of the questions that rolled in. Gene asked about timing of a rain arrival. So anyway, using this simulation for a rough sense of timing, Thursday morning we may begin to see some of those bands, outermost bands, the ones that are furthest out ahead, arriving basically across the southeast portion of the state, maybe getting up into the southern I-95 corridor. So to answer your question, Gene, you could see some light rain as early as tomorrow morning. But the little bit steadier rain should begin to creep up into the eastern half of the state and the Piedmont and the coastal plain, really during as the afternoon progresses. This is probably going to be more in the later afternoon before we see these heavier bands move up into the state. But by Thursday evening, we're going to start to see some consolidation of these bands and perhaps a little bit more intense rain beginning to evolve over the eastern half of the state. Okay, now again, if this band isn't actually in this exact spot tomorrow evening, again, please don't take this as this is exactly how this is going to happen. This is just a rough idea of the sense of timing. I will point out that as the night progresses into the early morning hours Friday, this is one of the features here that we've been tracking for several days now, and I'm talking about. Let me see if I can change the color of this so we can so I can see. I want to change this here so it's a little more obvious, but this band right here, and it stayed yellow. Sorry about that. This band right here is one that I'm concerned about that could put down some pretty strong winds. Let me switch back to the pointer here. So yes, and again, don't take this verbatim like it's going to happen exactly in Wake County or exactly in Johnston or exactly in Cumberland, but somewhere straddling the I-95 corridor, somewhere in this corridor, and it could be over in Wayne County, or Wilson, or but somewhere along the I-95 corridor, there's going to be a pretty intense band that's going to produce 40 to 60 mile per hour wind gusts, and I think it's going to be more like tomorrow night into the early morning hours Friday when we're going to see a lot of that tree damage that I talked about. So. Or have been talking about. So fortunately by Friday morning, and I don't have a timestamp here because I can't really, don't pin me to exactly what time it's going to get out of here, but sometime during the morning, the back edge will finally be exiting, or at least be pushing east into eastern North Carolina, and then finally moving off the coast sometime during the afternoon. But by Friday afternoon, it'll be all over. It'll be done and clear of central North Carolina. Okay, so I hope that answers some of the timing questions because, and again, I don't want to put a timestamp on here because we're just not that good at this point to give you exact timing of when these bands are going to get up here, but I just want to give a general sense of timing. All right, so again, I'll be emailing this out here as soon as we're wrapped up here. All right, so that pretty much wraps up our briefing, and our confidence is obviously, as I mentioned, is getting pretty good now because of the models are coming into decent agreement. Again, the three things we're concerned about: the wind, the rain, and then to a lesser extent the tornadoes. So again, watch out for a lot of tree damage. Again, especially along the I-95 corridor and eastward, higher winds, especially along the coastal areas. And again, late, really the worst of the winds tomorrow at nighttime hours. Okay, and then 4 to 8 inches of rain expected south and east of the triangle, lesser amounts west. And again, anytime you get that much rain, and anytime it's falling in bands with heavy rain rates, you're likely to experience flash flooding. So that's why we have the flood watch up right now, Thursday through midday Friday. Most of the tornado activity should stay to our east, but we can't rule it out completely. The best risk for tornadoes east of I-95. So With that, our next email briefing, obviously I'll email these slides out here within the next 20 minutes after we wrap up this webinar. But we're going to do another webinar update at 5:30, just like what we just did now. We're going to repeat a webinar at 5:30 to bring you any last-minute updates or any tweaks to the forecast. So be sure to join us for that. Use the same link you used to join this webinar for the 5:30 update. And again, the slides will be updated as